My mom was found murdered in her trailer. At the end of her life, someone beat her to death, and we have not gotten any answers about that. As it is written on the permit for cremation, it does state that no body that has died under foul play or suspicious circumstances shall be released for cremation. Yet that permit for cremation was signed by the coroner the same day he ruled her death a homicide.
Within a reasonable period of time, you should be able to release the body. So this is a very antiquated law, but if you cremate the body too soon, then you have destroyed the most important piece of evidence in an investigation.
Sometimes you may need to retrieve the body in case the coroner missed anything. If the body's gone, they can't do that.
I found out it was a homicide 2 days after we had her cremated. Cremating the body is like lighting the scene on fire. Why would we destroy evidence when we don't have to? In my mom's life, she was a giver. She helped people. But in the end, she was robbed of not only her life, but also of justice for her murder.
It isn't easy for Catherine Simpson to come back to False River. It was here, in 2008, where her mother, Kimberly Womack, was found dead in her home. Catherine and her family say they were initially told the death was an accident and that Kimberly had died after a fall.
I found out it was a homicide 2 days after we had her cremated.
Hasn't been easy, huh?
No, it hasn't at all. We haven't been able to get justice for her. We have not been able to get any attention towards getting the case solved or properly investigated. It's been a very long 12 years.
The coroner wrote on the death certificate, Womack suffered blunt force trauma to the head by assault, which caused a left-sided subdural hematoma. The coroner also noted she suffered from multiple fractured ribs. The death certificate was issued on August 4th, 2008. That same day, the coroner signed a cremation permit.
It was devastating, absolutely devastating to know that I had just destroyed the only possible evidence that could solve the case. It was insulting that they allowed me to do that knowing I did not know.
Cremation in Louisiana requires a permit from a coroner. According to state law, if after the necessary investigation, the coroner is satisfied that there are no suspicious circumstances, the coroner shall issue a permit for cremation. But if there are suspicious circumstances or the reasonable probability of the commission of a crime, the coroner shall deny the permit. This is one of at least hundreds of cases where a Louisiana coroner has signed a cremation permit when the cause of death was listed as homicide. KATC Investigates uncovered between 2013 and 2018 at least 895 such permits were issued by coroners in 56 of Louisiana's 64 parishes, including nearly every parish in Acadiana.
There are many people who will never get justice due to the cremation of their loved ones.
We reached out to the Point Capee Parish coroner to see if he thinks he violated state law or if the law needs to change. We received one-word responses to those questions: no. Because the issue is so widespread, we reached out to Dr. Bo Clark. He's the coroner in East Baton Rouge Parish, but also president of the Louisiana Coroners Association. Records show since 2013, his office has issued at least 100 cremation permits when the cause of death was listed as homicide. Dr. Clark declined an interview and said he would instead request an attorney general's opinion on the law.
If they're going ahead and cremating, they're violating the letter of the statute.
Ken Levy is a law professor at LSU. He says the intent of the statute is to preserve evidence.
Sometimes you may need to retrieve the body to figure out what exactly happened or, again, in case the coroner missed anything.
Which does sometimes happen.
What was considered an overdose death in Baton Rouge is now being investigated as a homicide. This after police and the coroner overlooked a gunshot wound. Funeral home workers discovered the wound while preparing the body of Joel Ross.
It's in the interest of both parties, prosecution and defense, to keep the evidence.
Levy helped us look for similar laws across the country. Louisiana is apparently in the minority. Illinois is the only other state that restricts the coroner's authority in cremation. The law there says the coroner may not approve the cremation or donation of the body if it is necessary to preserve the body for law enforcement purposes. But not all coroners in Louisiana allow homicide victims to be cremated.
Anytime that you have suspicious circumstances or you have the reasonable probability of a crime being committed, the method of disposition should be burial and not cremation, always.
Yancey Guerin is the chief investigator for the West Baton Rouge Parish Coroner's Office, one of a handful of parishes that does not issue cremation permits in homicide cases. He says preserving a body is important in criminal cases.
The evidence is still available to the defendant. Whether it will ever be used or not, it's there. If you have someone who has been arrested and going to trial for murdering your loved one, the last thing we want to do is, have the evidence destroyed to where they can get set free.
In autopsies, coroners typically preserve tissues and fluids as evidence, but we were curious if the goal of this law is to preserve the body as evidence, what evidence can be recovered from a body that's been embalmed and buried?
If you exhume a body that has been embalmed, it's harder to find evidence, but you can still recover some.
Chris DeLay teaches forensics courses at UL. He says the cause of death isn't always obvious during an initial exam. Take cases of strangulation.
The bruises may not show immediately. If you haven't seen the bruises, then you would not know that there was a strangulation. The only way you can tell would be if the hyoid bone is broken. If you exhume the body, that's going to be present. You can find that.
DeLay thinks this cremation issue presents another concern.
Coroners are elected officials under state law, and as such, they are only responsible to the voters. That's it.
Even some in the industry agree.
What we have a valid statute on the books, and as a public official, if we fail or refuse to perform our duties, it's malfeasance in office.
Back on False River, 12 years later, Kimberly Womack's case is still an open homicide investigation. Her daughter still hopes someone will eventually be held accountable, though she worries some evidence and the opportunity for a strong case was cremated along with her mother.
To me, it seems obvious. Cremating the body is like lighting the scene on fire. Why would we destroy evidence when we don't have to? I don't think you need a degree or any experience in criminal justice for that to be obvious.
It's been more than a month since the president of the Coroners Association told us he would be requesting an attorney general's opinion. According to the attorney general's office, they still have not received a request for an opinion from Dr. Clark. And just weeks after we started asking questions, a Baton Rouge lawmaker filed a bill looking to change the law to allow coroners to issue cremation permits even in criminal cases, quote, after the coroner's investigation is complete. Lawmakers will consider that legislation in the upcoming legislative session. For KATC Investigates, I'm Jim Hummel.